My name's Cecilia Dahl. I've been living and working on my sailboat full time for the last 6 years. In today's world, we can live and work and lead teams and build businesses from anywhere at any time. In fact, according to Zapier research, 63% of the fastest growing companies today are adopting a productivity anywhere mindset. What that means is they focus on finding the right people for the job and giving them a place to work where those individuals can be most productive and supporting them in that environment. Some people may want to be in an office full-time or part-time. Some people may appreciate working from their cabin in Alaska all the time. If that's where those people are most effective, then hire them and support them to do their job and fill their role in the way that works best for them. When we do that, amazing things are possible. It was the fall of 2008. I was the president and co-founder of a company called Smart Destinations. We had developed a proprietary ticketing system that allowed us to sell attraction passes in a number of cities around the United States. We had roughly 40 full-time employees and at least 8 physical offices around the US. We had just closed on our third round of venture capital, and our new investor, Glenn, had taken majority share control of the business. He was a shark. He was good at his job. He made a good investment, and we needed his money to grow. At the time, we had sensed that a recession was coming. We knew it was coming, but we had not foreseen the magnitude of this recession. In late September 2008, we saw the fall of Lehman Brothers. We saw the stock market plummeting every day. I mean, things just kept getting worse and worse as time went on. Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Countrywide, banks collapsing, businesses collapsing. And all the time I was keeping an eye on the stock market, but also looking at our sales, which were going down, 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 down. People were not spending money and certainly not on travel. And it was a very scary time. One day in one of our board meetings, Glenn leaned in a very Glenn way. If I'm being honest with myself, I didn't invest in this company to keep you alive during a recession. Ugh, the words, they just stung. And he wasn't wrong. He had not invested in the company to keep us alive. And the board agreed, and we had to look at cutting costs, dramatically cutting costs. Now, as the president and co-founder of a startup, and I don't know, many of you may feel this way too, you kind of believe that you're working efficiently and you're not overspending and you're doing things the right way to grow the business. And I had definitely told myself those things. We had a lean team of 40. Yes, we had these 8 offices, but I told myself we needed those offices because we needed to have a presence in those cities. So we could attend networking events and say that we were true partners in that destination. That gave us better relationships. We had technology in place. We needed someone who could go to the attractions if ever there was a glitch and give them really good high-level customer service so we could keep those partnerships intact because those partnerships were our product. And I told myself, we have to have these offices. If we don't have these offices, where are we going to keep all our stuff? How are we going to handle managing these places remotely if we need to be at all the networking events? What if customers are in the city and they need help from us? How do we help them and make them feel confident that everything's okay if we don't have a place for them to go? I had told myself we needed these offices, and I could not see a way that we could possibly close them down and send people to work from home. I didn't think it was possible. I had convinced myself that we were absolutely as efficient as we could be, and that we were only spending money on the things that we absolutely needed. But we were left with no choice because this recession was going so deep, and we didn't have control of the business anymore. Glenn the Shark had control of the business, and he was right to say what he said. Get rid of the offices, send people to work from home, hunker down, work on the technology, and when the recession is over, it'll all be better. I was terrified. terrified. I knew I was going to have to let some good people go. These were people who had supported me and my vision for my company from day one. I knew we were going to have to let them go. And then, on top of having fewer people to help us, now we were also going to have to shut down these offices. It was overwhelming. I couldn't see that there was a way around it. But we did what we had to do. We closed those offices and we sent people home. And this is back in 2008. We had no choice but to send people to work from home. And amazing things started to happen. People stepped up. People offered. Store our stuff in their apartments. We'll work from home. Hey, we'll even go out at night and attend those local networking events. We'll do more of them so that we can build better relationships with the attractions and make sure that they know that we're still here, that we haven't left them. It was amazing for me to see how people stepped up when they were given the opportunity to be productive from anywhere at any time. When we closed those offices, all the rules changed. We had to come up with specific KPIs that everyone had to follow. We had to stay in touch and learn to keep in touch in different ways, in new ways. Building and keeping trust within the team changed. Everything changed. But my team was thriving in that environment. As we were starting to recover after this recession, and we were doing twice as much work with half the people, and the company was super profitable, Glenn, our investor, who had majority share and control of the business at that point in time, decided that we needed to bring in an outside consultant to make sure that everybody was happy and that all was going well and that we were definitely being as efficient as we could be. So of course, I was a little nervous hearing this, thinking, well, I think we're efficient and I think everybody's happy, and it's always good to know. Come on in, talk to people, let's find out, let's make this thing better. But when you've got a third party coming in out of nowhere and he's going to start interviewing your team, you start to get a little nervous. That's a little bit of a nail biter because you never know what people might say or what they're thinking, although it's good to ask. So Vince comes in. Vince is the consultant, a real Boston guy, Harvard grad, former professional baseball player, crackerjack consultant on making sure that teams are functioning properly. And he goes out and interviews all of my team one at a time for a 360-degree view on me. I'll never forget when I met with Vince to hear what people had to say. Cecilia, I gotta tell you, your team would walk through a brick wall for you. Well, that felt kind of good. Wow. I didn't expect to hear it, and I certainly was happy to hear it, and I carried that around with me for years until I realized it wasn't me. It wasn't me that they would walk through a brick wall for, not even close. They would walk through a brick wall for the lifestyle that working remotely had afforded them, for the ability to be productive and do things on their own terms. That is what they wanted to defend, and that's what they would work hard to protect. And they would go to extremes, support the team, do extra work, whatever it was they could do, because they had found a place where they could do things on their own terms. For me, my team was thriving in the remote workplace. That's not going to be the case for every team. There are some people who need to be in an office environment. The point is, hire the right people for the job, the very smartest, the very best, no matter where they are. Make sure they fit in your company culture, and then support them to be productive in their roles. Give them the tools that they need to interact, to communicate, to understand what's going on, and to produce for the team, and they will walk through a brick wall for you. When I'm brought in to work with companies who are thinking about going hybrid or remote, it's common to hear the leaders in that group say, remote and hybrid work will never work here. Our culture won't support it. It can't happen. I don't see how we can implement it. And whenever I hear that, I remind myself, I told myself that same story. I was comfortable in the status quo. I believed that we were as efficient as we could be. So I know that if the company wants to try to go hybrid or remote, it can be done. There's a change and there's always work to do. And we do have to look at things a little bit differently. We have to approach leadership differently. Having a productivity anywhere mindset starts first and foremost with recognizing that you hire people to deliver a service, to deliver a result. And wherever they are, you support them to deliver that result. It changes the way you're evaluating people a little bit and a little bit about the dialogue of their role. And it changes some of the work you have to do to understand how to evaluate people and how to know that they're being productive. And some roles are harder than others to do that with, but it's absolutely possible. There are a few other areas of working with remote teams that are really critical to optimizing productivity. And while I cover a lot of different sections when I'm working with teams in-house, there are two that I really feel important to bring up. One is communication. You cannot have an optimized team, and especially a remote team, if you don't have good communication. First rule of communicating with remote teams is to get everybody on board and understanding and recognizing that communication is a two-way contract. A lot of the times we think the person who's sending the communication or the person who's responsible to let everybody know something, that's the person who's in charge of making sure that communication works. That's not the case. It's just as important to send information and be clear and concise as it is to make sure when you receive that information that you're interpreting it accurately and that you understand what is meant by that. I can't tell you how many times I've been in that situation where someone comes to me and says, I sent 5 emails, I don't know what more I could have done. And the reality is, that's not an excuse. There's a partnership, there's a team here. Both parties are responsible for making sure that that communication works so that productivity can move forward. If Melissa and Ben are working together and Melissa has sent Ben 5 emails and he's never answered, there needs to be a different way to communicate. And it's not okay for Ben to say, oh, her emails are so long-winded, I never read them, I can't be bothered to read them, they're so long, and so I ignore them. I've heard that a million times. That is not okay. It's a two-way contract. And both parties are responsible and, here's the key, must be held accountable to ensure that communication happens effectively. When you have everybody on board and understanding that first and foremost, we want to be productive. And in order to be productive, all communication must happen effectively, which means you send it clearly and concisely, and you receive it, and you acknowledge that you've received it, and you know that you've received it and understood it. That's when you'll unlock super efficient, effective communication. Here's another thing that I learned. You must keep the video on. When you have your Zoom calls or your conference calls or your meetings, everybody needs to be on video all the time. We know that working with remote teams, we're naturally handicapped because we don't have that interpersonal, non-verbal communication. You can't see people's body language at their desk, whether they're stressed. You don't see the size of the stack of files. You don't know that they're running around going from meeting to meeting because you can't physically see them. When we have the opportunity to get on a video call with our team, that is gold. That is the time that we can see facial expressions, that we can get to know each other that way. And it makes a huge difference. Keep the video on. And the last tip I'll give you with communications on virtual teams, and this is really important too, and that is set some communication norms. Get your whole team together, sit down and map it out. How often are we going to meet? What kinds of communication mechanisms are we going to use? What tools are we going to use and how are we going to use them? Who's going to make decisions? And here's an important one. If I email Susan and I don't hear back from her, how long am I supposed to give her before I assume she either didn't get it or I have to pick up the phone or do something to get help with that? What's the normal time that we respond to each other? Because my expectation might be that Susan's going to get back to me within 24 hours. But Susan might have an expectation that she has a whole week to get back to people on their emails. We need to agree on these things. Otherwise, people are going to make stuff up in their minds. I might email Susan, not hear back from her for 4 days, and I'm thinking, maybe she's ignoring me. I like to say that trust rides in on the back of a turtle and flies out on a rocket ship. And this is especially true on virtual and hybrid teams. It takes a long time to build trust on these teams and these environments, and it disappears in an instant. And trust is fundamental to your opportunity to really optimize productivity and efficiency on your team. People have to trust each other to be able to work on a team together. Now, there's a formula for trust. Trust is number of experiences divided by time. And on a remote team, you don't have all the interactions that you would have. In an office, you get water cooler chatter, you have the opportunity to jump out for a coffee with people, you banter up and down the elevator, you might have lunchroom breaks and chats with people. You don't have those opportunities, and all of those, even though they seem like they're not meaningful, are actually trust-building activities. So as a leader, we have to take responsibility to provide those types of trust-building activities on our team. The first thing we can do, the most important thing we can do to establish a culture of trust on our remote teams, that is to lead by example with transparency and honesty. Be transparent, be as honest as you can. When you're not transparent, first of all, just like I just said with communication, people will make up their own stuff. They'll start to make up stories about what they think is going on. And you don't want to go down that road because it can go south pretty quickly. So be transparent, be honest, and encourage everybody else on your team to also be transparent and honest in their communication and communicate regularly and clearly. That's your first step in building trust with your teams. There are actually 3 levels of trust. And over time, with more experiences and more time, as we just talked about that formula, that trust will build. The first level of trust is called rules-based trust. And that's really when you trust someone because you're told you have to. So, Jen, you have to trust Ben. You're working together on this team. Go do some stuff together and trust each other. That's a really vulnerable trust. And can you do it? Yeah, people join teams all the time. And they're new to the team and they get on and they think, okay, I'm going to trust this guy. But one false move and that trust is on the rocket ship on its way to Mars. After a little bit of time, you have this experience-based trust that's a little stronger where, Jen and Ben, they've worked together a little bit. She trusts that he knows how to do his job. She trusts that he's going to show up for the meetings. So yeah, she doesn't know him that well, but she's kind of like, okay, yeah, I can work with Ben and he knows how to do his job, and that's a stronger amount of trust. He might make a misstep here or there and it's not going to be the end of the world because they've established some trust. But if he makes a big blunder, rocket ship time, that trust is going to Mars. Now, the third level of trust, this is when you really know people. This is established trust. This is when you've been working together, you know them as a person, you know that they have a family, you've built a relationship. You're going to trust that person to have your back. If you're not in the room, they're not going to throw you under the bus. That's a high level of trust. And it takes a long time to build that trust on virtual teams. But as leaders, you can do some things to move that along. One of those things is to make time during your calls for people to get to know each other. You can either start by just asking questions or having people do a little in-home scavenger hunt and sharing what they're finding. There's all kinds of games and activities that you can share. But take that time. It's important. Schedule a virtual cocktail hour. It's really important for people to connect and get to know each other on that personal level. And the more you can do that on your team in a virtual environment, the faster they're going to go through those levels of trust and the more trust they're going to have with each other. I'm really excited to have been able to participate in this book, The Great Leadership Awakening, to be part of something so unique and so amazing with this wonderful group of women. I'm very passionate about the opportunities ahead for remote work, for people to access jobs and opportunities from anywhere they are in the world, for companies to have the opportunity to get talented people on their teams who were out of their reach because they couldn't commute to the office previously. I know there are still a lot of challenges ahead for remote work. There are new technologies to come to make things easier for us. It's getting better and easier every single day. And the interpersonal piece of it will come with time. We'll change the way we learn to communicate, the way we learn to build trust, and how we connect with one another. We're already starting to learn how to do that in a digital environment. The next step for me is to take my message to the world, to take my message to people so I can help leaders of virtual teams adapt, build trust, build cohesion, make sure they get the right communication tools in place so that their people will walk through a brick wall for those jobs, for those companies, so that their businesses can be more successful, more efficient, more profitable. That's what I'm going to do next.